Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of A Mental Break. Thanks for tuning in. I thought I would tell the story. It's story time, I guess you could say, guys. I'm going to tell the story on how I left my abusive relationship and, what happened. So I'm, prepared to tell the story, which is, being in an abusive relationship, domestic violence relationship. It does a lot to your self-esteem, and it's a lot to recover from. And I'm hoping this story will help other women or men. Men get are in domestic situations as well, so I hope my story will help. I was married. I was married twice, but my first husband is the one that was the abuser, and I was married. And when I first met him, everything was great. I met him during the 80s. And during this time, we didn't know anything about love bombing. I didn't know what that meant. Like, this is a term that's used now. But back then, I didn't know what that meant. But when I met him actually filling out a job application. And, we talked and hit it off, and he was driving and I was walking. I was a college student at the time, and he offered to give me a ride home after we met and exchanged numbers. And I told him, no, thank you. I just walked to the train and go the train home because, again, I didn't know him like that, so I wasn't ready to just get in a car with him. So we wind up speaking, we wind up dating, and he started love bombing me. He was, very attentive, the gifts, very complimentary. Everything was all about me. Everything was whatever I wanted. So, the courting process didn't take too long. We were dating a year before we got married, and we got married. I thought I met the love of my life. I thought, wow, this man is going to be my everything. I'm going to have children with this man. I'm going to live my happily ever after with my picket fence and everything. Because when I got married, I wanted to stay home and be the homemaker. I wasn't someone that wanted to go out there and be this big career woman. That's not something that I initially wanted. I was raised to be a wife, and I know, uh, that's something that you don't hear a lot of. But I was raised between my grandparents and my aunt and uncle. And my grandma, I spent my younger years with my grandmother, my teenage years with my aunt, my uncle. And in my younger years, my grandmother, I've been cooking since I was 9 years old. And I was taught to serve the man first. I was taught on how to be a wife. I was not told as a young girl to go to college and get a degree. Now, college was mentioned. Now, don't get me wrong, college was definitely mentioned. It was on the table, but it wasn't pushed like it was pushed for me to learn how to be a wife. My schooling was not pushed as hard. Now, I'm not saying schooling wasn't pushed, it just wasn't pushed as hard as being learning how to be a wife and a mother, because my grandmother basically taught me how to cook and clean and just do, this is what you're supposed to do. And then I got the best of both worlds, actually, because my grandmother was more of the traditional woman, even though my grandmother worked. Now, my grandmother worked because my grandfather, that was my grandmother's second marriage, and when she married my grandfather, he was older and he was retired, and she was younger and she was still working. So my grandmother was still working, but my grandmother would still come home and clean and cook, even though I did the majority of the cleaning in reality. She did some cleaning, but for the most part, I did the majority of the cleaning. And she did most of the cooking. She did most of it. As a matter of fact, she did most of the cooking. I did most of the cooking when I went to go live with my uncle, because my aunt was a career woman. So that's why I said I had the best of both worlds. So in my younger years, I was taught how to be a wife and a mother. But in my teenage years, I was taught to be an independent woman. So I had the best of both worlds growing up. Now, when I met my first husband, I was going through a transition because I had lost some family members. I had also went through something else that was traumatic for me, which I'm not going to mention on this video. So my self-esteem was low at the time that I met my ex-husband. It was, it was low. So just bringing it forward again, we got married. And after we got married, I noticed the change. I noticed he started to be more controlling. I noticed that he started to be more possessive. Now, let me just say, I found out I was pregnant with my son the day we got married because back then, uh, you had to get blood tests to get married. And they usually, um, you usually don't hear anything about the blood test. What happened was I went to my doctor to get the blood test, and the results came back that I was pregnant. So they called me the morning that I was, putting my wedding dress on and told me I was pregnant. So I told my, husband at the time at the altar that I was pregnant. So we were excited. We were happy about it. I was happy that I was pregnant. But after the wedding and after we started, we came home and started living as husband and wife, that's when things took an ugly turn. So not only it started off with yelling, pushing, slamming stuff, throwing things. That's how it started. Then it became a push, a shove. Then it became the hitting. And that's when it became the hitting. So um I had my son. The abuse did not escalate until after I had my son. The 9 months that I was pregnant, it was just yelling, shoving, controlling, possessiveness. He took me to work, he picked me up, he took me to the store. Like I couldn't go anywhere on my own. That's something I couldn't do. I couldn't go out with my girlfriends, stuff like that. I couldn't visit my family when I wanted to. I could visit my family when it was required, like for holidays and special events. But if I wanted to just go on a whim, I couldn't go. That was an automatic fight. That was, because I had his son. You're not going anywhere with my son. I don't want my son, and this and that. So that's what I went through with that. Now, during this time, I knew that I had to get out of the marriage. I knew early on. I said, this is just not going to work out. It's just not. But I didn't know what to do because of the fact I'm 27. My family told me not to marry him, mind you. I didn't even throw in that part. My grandmother, she told me that is something not right with him. Don't marry him. My whole family told me not to marry him. They all said it wasn't a good idea, XYZ. I wasn't listening. When you're young and you think you love a man, can't nobody tell you nothing about a man. So I didn't listen. And because I didn't listen, I didn't tell my family what was going on because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed. And by this time, I'm having a child now. So I'm in an abusive relationship with a child and I'm trapped. Basically, I'm trapped. So I was on break from work because I did have a job at the time. I had a job when I met him, so I was working. I had a pretty good job. I had a job, it was a union job. I was doing pretty good. I was making pretty good money at that time. Because at that time, uh we I was making almost $10 an hour back in the 80s, and that was a lot back then. Because back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, minimum wage was almost $5 or something like that, and I was making 10. So making $10 an hour was pretty big back then. So, because you're talking about the mid late 80s, 87, 88 in there. So I was doing pretty good. It was, like I said, a union job, full benefits. I had 5 weeks vacation, 12 sick days, 6 personal days. Like, I had some really good benefits. I had, great health coverage. I had the great, I didn't have to pay no copay. Back in the 80s, you didn't pay copays. So anyway, I had a great job. Well, he wanted me to quit my job, but I put my foot down about not quitting my job. And it wasn't so much that I put my foot down. What I did was because I knew what I was dealing with, I told him the perks of me keeping the job. So I didn't just say, "Well, I'm keeping my job." I didn't argue with him. I was like, "Well, if I quit my job, then we won't have that health insurance, and we got that's better insurance." And so I had to tell him like different things, and then he would be like, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, it's probably better that you do keep the job." So he agreed after I ran off what are the benefits of keeping the job. But in reality, I wanted to keep it so that I have way of having money so I can get the hell away from him. Because that's why I wanted to keep the job. So I knew what I was doing then. So I knew I had to leave. I knew that. I just didn't know how or when. That was the thing. So I think the first thing for me was recognizing that I had to leave because I was not going to stay in a relationship with a man that is, I was living in fear every day, because I didn't know what was going to happen every day. I didn't know if he was going to be angry going off that day. I didn't know if he was going to hit me that day. I didn't know what was going on. So every day was a day of uncertainty. I also need to mention that he was using drugs during this time. So during this time, he was using cocaine. So this made things worse. He was also cheating. There was another woman. And how I know it was another woman, because she called my house. So, so all these things are going on. So I just like, listen, I got to get the hell out of here. And I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. So what I did was, it took me well, let me say this, because I left out a key information. After my son was born, 8 months later, I was pregnant again with my daughter. And that wasn't something that was planned. When I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, I was like just devastated. Not because I didn't want to have the baby, because I was trying to figure out a way to leave. And having the baby, knowing I have to wait, this going to take 9 months to carry the child. Then I have to heal. The baby is young, so you're talking about basically being around for another year, basically. And I couldn't say anything to anybody because everybody around me, my family told me not to marry him. You don't want to tell your girlfriends because they're all in relationships. They seem happy, and I'm over here miserable. So, and I had to just fake it. So, it was nothing I could do. So I said, I'm gonna have to sit it out. So I was pregnant with my daughter. So I just kept my head down. I just, I just let him do whatever he wanted to do. I didn't question anything. I didn't argue with him. I didn't do none of that because I knew it was nothing I could do. So if I knew I was at his mercy, I just let him do whatever the hell he wanted to do. Because I'm just, I just didn't want to go through that because I didn't want to be hit on. I didn't want the argument. There's another baby at this point. We have a baby, so I'm like, I'm not jeopardizing my children like this. So I kept my head down. It didn't stop the domestic abuse, but it wasn't as frequent because I just didn't entertain anything. And but the times that we did go through it, it was because he got mad because I wouldn't respond to anything. So he got mad because I wouldn't argue with him. So there was a couple incidences where I did have some abuse then. So once my daughter was born, I knew it was time to put some kind of plan into effect. I knew it was. So what happened was, my daughter was born and I waited. Now during that time of me being pregnant with my daughter and having my son, let me just say that I left a couple times. I had to go away for a couple days because he was coming. He I talked to him on the phone. Back then it was pagers. Excuse me. I paged him and told him that the baby needed diapers and stuff. So he got mad because I paged him because he was out having fun. So he told me when he come back, he going really tear it into me. So I was scared because he sounded so angry. So what I did was I packed up my stuff and I ran out of there and I went to a hotel for the weekend because I was just scared. Like I'm because I don't know what he was going to do. It's just at the point I just didn't know anymore. And I went to a hotel for a couple of days until he calmed down. I talked to him during the time that I was gone, and he finally calmed down, so I came back. So, I did that, and then I realized, what? I said I can't live in fear. I can't have my kids live through this. I just can't do it anymore. So at this point, my daughter's a newborn, and my son is 18 months old. So I waited for my daughter to get her first set of shots. And I I was like, I have to find a plan. I have to think about a plan. So I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I was thinking, like, well, how am I said, I have two kids to take care of. How am I going to get rid of this man? How am I going to pay rent, childcare, food, clothes? How am I do all this by myself? Because now I'm in this situation. Like, how am I going to do it? And, of course, he's telling me all these things. Nobody's going to want you. You got two kids. You can't take care of yourself on your own. How you going to take care of two kids? You need me and all this kind of stuff. So these are the things that I'm hearing. So I'm just getting discouraged and I'm just sitting there on the edge of my bed. Like, what am I going to do? And then I heard some words in my head. I had a flashback of being on a bus, and I heard these two girls talking. And I heard this girl say, if you go to a woman against abuse shelter, you could get Section 8. So I thought to myself, hmm, that's a thought. Because if I get Section 8, then I can afford to take care of me and my kids, because Section 8 is based on your income. I had a job. I was out on leave from my job. When I had my daughter, I was out for a year. I took a leave. So I took a leave for a year because I was trying to figure out how to leave him when I go back to work. So that's why I took the year off. I didn't take the year off for my daughter. I took the year off because I had to figure out how to leave him. So I remembered what the girl said. So I said to myself, I'm gonna pick a fight. What I did was I called information for the number for women against abuse, because back then there were no cell phones with the internet and all that. So I called. You used to be able to dial. I think it was 555 1212. I think that was the number back then that you could call information and get a phone number. So I called and got the phone number for um, women against abuse, the domestic violence hotline number. So I called. I didn't call them yet. No, I did call, and I told them what was going on with me, and they told me, was I ready to leave, and this and the third. So I told them I wasn't ready to leave at that particular time, and I wasn't, because what they wanted me to do, they wanted me to get some things together. They wanted to meet. They wanted me to meet like a representative from their organization, and they were telling me where to go and stuff like that. So I was like, I wasn't ready to leave that day. So they said, "Well, call when you're ready to leave." During the conversation, they mentioned the process that once I come in there, that I would get settled into intake, and that one of the things that is mandatory for that is to put a restraining order against, the abuser. So I knew that I had to do that. So since I knew that I had to do that, I was like, well, let me give it a reason, because I wanted this to stick. I wanted to make sure this worked, because I was just tired. So when he came, what I did was, not that night. What I did was I went to Clover. Now I don't know whoever's listening. Clover is like a discount store back in the day. Think of it as like a TJ Maxx or a Ross, because that's what Clover was. So I went to Clover and I got, some just cheap clothes, because we were going into a shelter. So I got cheap clothes for the kids. And, I was fine with what I had. It wasn't no big deal. But the kids had like really, really nice clothes, because my family had bought them a lot of nice things. And their godfather and godmother bought them some really nice designer clothes and stuff like that. So I didn't want to take it into the shelter. So I went and bought them, some outfits, and I got Pampers, and, I got everything I needed. And I made sure that I had everything, and I had my bag packed in the bottom of my closet. So I made sure that I packed the bag with my stuff, the kids' stuff. I just made sure that we had a week's worth of clothes, and that was it. And that, the kids had the things that they needed. So when he came home after I got everything together, I picked a fight with him on purpose. I picked a fight because I knew what he was going to do. And I called the police. I picked a fight. He hit me. Police came. They put him in a paddy wagon because I had visible bruising. So that was my way out. Once the police took him, then I knew. I called the Women Against Abuse Shelter, told them I was ready to leave now. I have everything ready. And they told me where to go. So I went to the location that I had to go to, and I filed, I did everything that I needed to do and got the process going. During this time, I had to go to court. He was locked up. Now he was locked up. I had to go to court on the restraining order. They took me to go get the restraining order the next day. So I had to go to court on the restraining order on the third day. He was still locked up at that time. So I went to court, and his sister was there, and his sister threatened me. So we went to court, and the judge gave two restraining orders based on what he heard, and what with me being there and having young children and everything that was going on. And he also had a record. That was another thing. He had a record. He's been in jail before. So the doctor, I'm sorry. The judge listened to the case, looked at everything, and I wound up walking away with two restraining orders. One that they give out, the usual one, and then the judge put another one on him to make sure that the first one sticks. So I had two sets of papers. He gave me another set of papers to take to my kids' daycare and stuff. Like he said, take it to the daycare, whatever. He cannot come get the kids. So, I made sure that I got all my paperwork and took it to the kids, because my son at that time, he was going to daycare at that time because I had my daughter and I couldn't handle both of them at home. So I put my son in daycare so that I could take care of my daughter, and I paid for it because I was getting money when I was out on leave. I was on maternity leave, and I was able to get money from being in the union. So, I paid for it. So I was able to get in the shelter. We got that done. Fast forward, I got to Section 8. When I got to Section 8, we were talking again, and I let him come and live in the house. And if anybody that listens to this have been in a domestic violence situation, you know the cycle of domestic violence. For those of us who's been in it, there is a cycle. And what I told him, this is what I told my ex-husband. I told him I would let him come back in the house. However, if he messed up this time, if he put his hands on me and messed up this time, then he is absolutely done. He cannot come back. We're done and it's over. So I let him come back in the house. And what happened? It happened again. He broke my ankle. He went to go grab a knife to stab me, and I was running out the door, and he grabbed me by my neck, and I fell in the doorway. My ankle was broke. But across the street, it was some guys across the street, because I was already living there before he came. So the block that I lived on, it was a small block. So I got to know everybody on the block. So when they saw what was going on, because the door was open, they came over to help me out, and he wound up leaving. And that was it. Once that incident happened and my ankle was broke, then it was over. That was it for me, because now we're talking about broken bones. It's one thing to have bruises, and a busted lip, but it's another thing that now you're breaking my bones. So now we're done. So I had to go to the hospital. I had to call family. Family finally knew what was going on, because I had to tell the truth at this point. My ankle is broke. So I had to tell it. So I told my family. So some of my family was supportive and some wasn't. Some was saying, listen, you signed up for it, then you got to deal with the consequences. So, I did that. And I went to the hospital, got a cast, had to wear cast. I had to stay at my aunt's house for a while because I couldn't take care of my kids by myself. So I was up my aunt's house with my cousins so they can help me take care of the kids and stuff like that. I couldn't shop. I had to go to doctor's appointments. It was just a lot. So I needed help. So I wound up staying at my aunt's house with my cousins and stuff like that. So until I was able to go back home. Once I got back home, I made sure he got all his stuff, get out, and we haven't been together since. So the reason why I'm sharing this story is that I'm hoping that I can help someone can listen to my story and they can get the courage to leave, because I know what I felt like being in that domestic violence situation, and I felt like I was in a prison. I couldn't I felt like I was like dying. I felt like I was shriveling up. Like I can't explain what it feels like, and only if you've been in a domestic violence relationship, then you know what I'm talking about. You're losing yourself in a domestic violence relationship. You're losing you don't even know who you are anymore. And I just remember one day before I even put him out, I was going through the living room into the dining room, and I just snapped out of nowhere. I just picked up, I had this dryer, this sit under dryer. I picked it up out of handle and I just threw it at the wall and left this big hole because I was losing myself. I'm snapping. Like I just couldn't believe what I'm living, where I'm living, like what's going on in my life. And I couldn't believe what was happening to me. So I knew that I had to make changes to save myself and my children. And I knew that was something I had to do. And I was right to do it because once we broke up and I divorced him and everything, he married another woman and had children, and he was beating her. He was because I got a call from my brother-in-law who said that he was down because my brother-in-law is a bail clerk at the our city hall, and he called me and told me that he was there for domestic abuse when his wife, and he asked me did I want him to be released or did I want him locked up. I said do whatever y'all want to do, I don't even care. And I just hung up the phone because I didn't care. So it took it was a really scary time in my life because it's a very lonely time because you can't tell people what you're going through because you're embarrassed. And if you tell people, the first thing they're going to say is leave, and you're not ready to leave because when you're in that domestic violence cycle, you have to leave when you're ready to leave. But what I will say to anyone who's listening to this video, you have to leave because it's not going to get better. It's not going to change. The abuse is going to escalate. It's going to get worse and worse because that's what it did for me. It escalates. It doesn't get better. They get bolder, they get worse. And he or she could accidentally unalive you by accident because of the abuse. So, I was hit with things, I was pushed, things thrown at me. I was hit with a child's swing. He picked up the child's swing that our child sits in and hit me with it. My 18-month-old son ran in front of me to stop him from hitting me because he was hitting me already. But my son ran over and stood in front of me and said, Daddy, stop. At 18 months old, Dad, stop. And when you start going through things like that, it's time to go. An 18-month-old child should not be running in front of you saying, Dad, stop. That's something that shouldn't be going on. And I knew then I was pregnant with my daughter at that time, but I knew I had to leave. I knew it. It was no way, but I had to stay to deliver the baby. If I wasn't pregnant, I would have left a year earlier. So ladies, listen. I know that there are many different circumstances, ladies and men. There are many different circumstances on why you would stay in a relationship where you're being abused. And I get it. It could be financial. It could be you don't want other people to know your business. You want to save face. Listen, none of that matters. What matters is saving your life. That's what matters. Because once I left him, my life has gone up since then. Leaving him was the best thing I did. I was happier. I have a life. I had a life when I left him, and I have one now. I went on to become a nurse. I've raised my children. We've had a great life. I've made good money. We've been on great vacations. I've been able to accomplish some things. And now I'm on YouTube. And part of my mental health is like doing this YouTube. I think this is helpful for me because, part of my battle with depression off and on is having the domestic violence in my history and what that has done to me because my life has not been the same since then. I have had a happier life. I am a different person. I'm a better person. I'm a happier person. But the person that I was, that person doesn't exist anymore because being in a domestic violence relationship, it takes something from you and you can't get it back. Any trauma in your life, it changes you and you can't get it back. So that's one of the contributing factors to my depression. My off and on depression because I pretty much handle my depression pretty well now. I'm not on any medication or anything, but I know how to redirect myself. I know how to handle triggers. I know how to do that. So because I know how to do that, I'm able to maneuver through things. So again, I'm going to close out this video because this is a little long. It's coming up on 30 minutes. And with me, this being a new channel, I need to keep the video short. So thank you for anyone who listens to this video. I hope that this video will help someone in some way. There are two links below. One link is for therapeutic listening. If you wanted to book a call for a therapeutic listener. And again, a therapeutic listener is someone that's just going to listen to you. They don't, everyone that works for the company, Helpful Assist, they are licensed professionals. They all have signed NDAs. They all are aware of HIPAA. So everything, so any calls are confidential. You don't even have to give your real name. You could, just, have your whatever you need to talk about, just talk about it. If you want advice, they'll give you advice. If you think that you need to be assessed, then maybe you need to see a therapist or see a psychiatrist, they can do that. So it's all about what you want to do. So there's a link for a therapeutic listener, and there's also a link for my book, Preventing Scars: How to Recognize an Abuser, because I think a lot of women don't know, and men don't know, can't see um traits of an abuser, like the things that they do to bring you in, and then next thing you know, you're in a domestic violence situation. So I have those two links in the comments section. So please feel free to book a call, or if you want to grab the ebook, grab the ebook real quick. If domestic violence consultation calls are free, anyone who wants to book a domestic violence call, please click the links in the bio for my link tree. And if you scroll down my link tree, there are free domestic violence consultations. I have no problem talking to anyone who is in a domestic violence situation, who wants advice or just wants to talk and just don't want to be alone. Don't want someone to know, what's going on with them, and don't want to be alone. So that's there also. So thank you for listening. This is a new channel. As you can see, I have very few subscribers. So again, I'll come back with another video. I got some good topics coming up. I've been putting shorts up here just to keep the channel going, but I'm going to keep putting some things up because it's a lot going on in this world right now. And we really do need to talk about some things to keep us mentally on track, because we're going into the winter months. Holiday season is bad. Also, the winter is bad for some people because people get the winter blues. So it's a lot going on. So I'll be back, and you guys have a great week.